Good morning, everybody. This is Heidi Rocky of Rocky's Rad Resources, and today I'm doing a bit of an add-on to my math mini lessons. For those of you who don't know, I was a classroom teacher for 9 years, and then for the last 2 years I have been homeschooling my own 3 children while we live in our RV and travel around the United States. And so today I wanted to teach a little bit of a lesson for the teachers or the parents, but you are welcome to show this to your students as well. And today's lesson is just simply how to set up your interactive math notebooks, because there's a couple of different ways that you can go about doing that. So the first thing that you need to do when you're setting up your interactive math notebooks is you need to choose what type of notebook that you're going to use. And this may change from year to year as you develop this interactive math notebook program in your classroom and you figure out what works best. You may also choose to give your students a choice, especially as they're older and more mature, or they're able to recognize what works best for them. So the 3 big choices you have are the standard composition notebook. Composition notebooks, of course, are lovely because pages can't fall out. But of course, if you do make a mistake or children need to pull out a page for any reason, then it's much more challenging than, say, a spiral bound notebook. With either of these types of notebooks, you need to be prepared to have quite a bit of glue ready for your students, because they will need to glue things into their interactive math notebooks quite regularly, and you need to make sure that the papers are going to stay in there for them. And your other option is to have a 3-ring binder, and rather than gluing all of those things onto the pages in a notebook, then you hole punch them and you put them into your binder. For some students, the binder is the perfect option because you're not worrying about gluing and folding and all of those things that you have to deal with a spiral bound. However, I, in my personal experience, have had a lot of issues with students using a binder and having pages fall out, reinforcers not working, lotta. So it really comes down to knowing what's best for your students in your classroom or in your homeschool environment. I have used interactive math notebooks in all 3 of these types of notebooks, both in the classroom and in a homeschool environment. So they're all options, they're all possible. It just depends on what works best for you and your students. The next part of setting up your interactive notebook pages, no matter which type of notebook, you need to add a title page and you need to add a table of contents. For the title page, the importance is really making sure that you know who this notebook belongs to, because especially in the beginning they all start to look the same. It also helps the students refer back if they have their school year on there, because this is a math notebook that they are going to be able to reuse. The entire purpose behind the interactive math notebook is that you can reuse it over and over and over. You can refer back to it, you can use it as a reference, it's a guide. So if they know what school year they used this in, then they'll be able to say, oh wait, I know that the multiplication pages might be in this one, or I know that we did long division that year, whatever, so they know where to refer. The table of contents is also a tool for them. On the table of contents, you're going to add your lesson focus for that week. You can write in what your math idiom is, they can write down what their textbook pages are, whether they worked on a video, or had a test that week, did a project. But the key piece is where it says pages up in the right hand corner. I have my students on the first week write down whatever page they're starting on, but they're not allowed to fill in the end page of where that section ends until they begin the next page, until they begin the next week. When we move into the next week, into the next unit or lesson focus, then they can put in that closing page number, and that allows them to know when they're coming back to study for a test or prep for a video or use this notebook as the reference tool that it should be used as. They know that everything that they need for multiplication can be found between pages 2 and 20. Now, the other key piece to using the table of contents is you have to make sure that students number their pages as they go. That was always a challenging part for my students. They do get it. It just takes practice. you have to keep saying, okay, make sure that you numbered all your pages, and a lot of times you'll get to the new week's focus, and you're like, all right, fill in what you need for your table of contents, and don't forget to add an end page for last week. And they'll be like, oh, I forgot to write my page numbers. And so that's the perfect time. They can go back, they can write their page numbers in, they can fill it in, but keeping up with that table of contents each week is really important, and it really builds into the fact that this is a reference tool that they are building for themselves. I personally write up my lesson focus and my math idiom and all textbook pages on the board. When I had a multi-age classroom, I would have each grade level had a different color. So like second grade was in red, and third grade was in blue, and fourth grade was in purple. And that way they knew where they were looking, they knew exactly what to look for, and they wrote it down. And the first 3-4 weeks, you have to keep reminding, especially your younger students, your second graders are really going to struggle with that probably the whole first trimester. But once you build it in, they get it. And I was teaching in a multi-age class when I started my interactive math notebooks, and by the second year with those kids, they knew it. I didn't have to do anything. I never had to tell them. They knew where to look. They knew how to train themselves, how to teach themselves what it was we were going to learn that week. So, title page, table of contents, really important for your interactive math notebook. Both of these that you see on the screen are available for free in my interactive math notebook setup guide. So that will be linked below the video. Feel free to go ahead and download those if you want to use them. After you have it all set up, each week it is very important to build in a reference page. This is the reference page that is available in my startup guide. It's just a very generic, when do people use math? It's a great intro lesson for your first week, getting students used to using the interactive math notebook, and also starting to talk about why is it we're building this? Why is math so important? What's going on that we really need to learn math every single day? The majority of your reference pages should have some place for your students to interact. This one has a section on the bottom for them to add on to. Some of them will ask them to complete a problem. Another thing that I always did as a teacher is make sure that I was saying, okay, look, see this vocabulary word, highlight it, underline it, just star the strategy on this page that you like best. Get them used to interacting with that page, that it's okay to write on it. That's why an interactive math notebook is better than a textbook. You can write on it, you can annotate it, it's yours. So reference pages every week. I have plenty of them available in my Teachers Pay Teacher store, but there's tons of them out there. Sometimes even though I have tons of them that I like, I also used other random sheets, posters, things that I would find. Sometimes my students would make up reference pages, specifically when I had the multi-age classroom. My older students might make a reference page as a project, and I would use it with my younger students. That sort of thing is definitely possible. Once you have the reference page in there, make sure you go over it, make sure you talk to your students about it, and then you're going to go ahead and do learning activities, things that you would do in a regular classroom. You might do an inquiry or an activity with manipulatives. You're going to add in your idioms if you want to. That is something that I always did. You can find them in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. It's a great math language connection. They're extremely important for ESL students, which is, if you've been watching any of my videos or reading my blog, you know that's kind of my focus, is making sure that your ESL students are right on board with everybody else. And so this is a great way to integrate that. You can add your vocabulary into your learning activities. You can add in regular problem solvers, daily problem solvers, problem solving path, all of those sorts of things. And these sheets can be glued right in. In fact, I encourage my students to make sure that anything that we did that week with our lines and angles focus is within that section. And that goes back to that table of contents. You want to make sure that all of that stuff is together so that when they want to refer back to this page, they know where to find it. It's all together. It's on their table of contents. They know what they're doing. So they do all kinds of learning stuff. They work through problems having to do with that focus. And then they need to have time to reflect. So you take some time. I have within each of my interactive math notebook lessons this particular set of format where the student has 5 options. They choose which option is best for them. that would work best for them to reflect on what they're learning. This is that time when they're actually starting to build together what they did in the learning lessons and the textbook pages. They put together what they learned on the reference sheet, and they kind of start to create their own meaning. And they do that meaning in a variety of ways. Now again, at the beginning of the year, you're going to have kids who will always write a paragraph because it's the easiest thing on the list. They know how to do it. I would encourage my students, and I do encourage my students, to try as many different ways as they can. Okay, choose a different way each time. And on my particular reflections, I will always add different options so that each week isn't the same thing. We're not always making a pie chart. We're not always making a T-chart. But you're going to have the same things come up. Write a paragraph, create a Venn diagram. You might want to create a poster in your room that says these are the possible ways to reflect on math. And just getting students to think about their own thinking. So at the bottom you see the reflection evaluation. So after they're done, they should be thinking to themselves, does this really show that I'm thinking about this week's concept? Does this really follow all the guidelines? Will this help me at a later date? Because again, everything with the interactive math notebook is going back to using it as a reference tool. If they can't use this to refer back to later, then is it really any good for them to write in their notebook? And now this particular option that you're seeing on the screen is for your composition spiral notebooks. You glue it in and they can work underneath. I've also, in all of my interactive math notebook pages, included this, which has a place for them to work right on. That's perfect if you're working in a spiral bound. I will have my students hole punch it. They'll work on that page. They can work on the back and on additional paper if needed. But at least that gives them an option where they're not having to glue it onto a piece of paper, which doesn't always work well if you're using a binder setup notebook. Last thing to using interactive math notebooks, and this is something I've been talking about the entire thing, is to have them use their notebooks as a learning tool. You see in this picture, my students were actually going back to that reference page while they're creating their nets. They're using them, they're referring back to them while they create their math videos to teach other people. And math videos, I'm going to do a completely separate video on this, but having students create math videos about what they learned is so huge, because not only it's that, cementing their thinking, rethinking things, it's an assessment of their learning, it's also an assessment of their presentation skills, and it's something that you can turn around and reuse with other students anytime. So that's something, a whole nother video. Their tests, I also have them, before we take a test, I ask them to go back and use this as a study guide. My older students create a study guide using all the reference sheets, and that information is thereby reused when they take their tests. These notebooks are not to be stuck in a shelf and ignored. They are a learning tool. They're something that should be referred back to daily, and they should be an accumulation of all of the knowledge that they've learned in math this year. Thanks for watching. This is the first of these type of math mini lessons for teachers. They're a little bit professional development, a little bit of mini lesson. I have plenty of actual mini lessons that are meant strictly for your students. Feel free to stop by the YouTube page and watch those, hand them out to your students. They're great for flipped classroom. They're great for helping out in a self-paced classroom. Anything along those lines, feel free. This is Heidi Rocky coming to you from RRV. There will be many more lessons to come. Feel free to like our YouTube page, follow our blog. Both of those are here as well as in the description. Also, every resource that you saw today, I will have a link to in the description. Feel free to stop by and let us know how the interactive math notebooks are going for you. Thanks for watching and have a great day.